Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining our panel session about Dubai, the next blockchain startup valley or the next crypto valley. And so it's a fascinating topic for the next 55 minutes. My name is Oliver Bussmann. I'm the president of Crypto Valley Association, which is an ecosystem in Switzerland to bring the different ecosystem players from research, startups, investors, government, R&D together to bring business, know-how, capital into a location, but it's a well-connected global network. And so my pleasure is to talk today about Dubai, because I think Dubai did something really, from my perspective, outstanding in announcing the blockchain strategy 2020. It's a very aspirational goal to become blockchain enabled, especially from a government perspective by 2020 to drive the efficiency, also to build new ecosystem around new ecosystems, new industries. So I think to attract new businesses leveraging the new technology, also then to perceive globally as one of the leading countries in utilizing blockchain, and then also set up a global network with Europe and North America to team up from that perspective. So from a starting point of view, very interesting value proposition, ambitious to be in 2020 in 2 years. So I want to start our discussion and ask the panel to introduce yourself, a little bit your background, especially from a blockchain perspective, and then also, before we go on the detail level on Dubai, so what do you think are the major trends in blockchain 2018 impacting certain nation, certain ecosystem? Hubertus, you want to start, especially as a local resident?
Afternoon. My name is Hubertus. I'm the managing partner of early stage venture capital firm in Dubai called Enabling Future. We are 2 family offices. It's not a fund. And we are investing in the US, MENA, and Europe. We have also offices in Switzerland. That's why I know this gentleman here. I'm probably one of the examples of Dubai being a very positive and open place for entrepreneurs. I moved here 5 years ago, setting up my first company in tech. It was a mobile games company, which was acquired 2 years ago by a NASDAQ-listed company from Sweden, Stillfront. So it was a good example that Dubai is a very open society and very open ecosystem for international people wanting to do business here. This was way before blockchain, so happy to be on the panel.
Okay, Ralph?
Thanks, Oliver. Thanks, Hubertus, for the first introduction. I'm also out of the Crypto Valley from Switzerland. I'm working together with Oliver to make Switzerland a great place for blockchain. And as this is a decentralized world, we think it is a hub business, so we need hubs in the most valuable places all over the world, and one of this is for sure the Middle East, and here especially Dubai for us. So we are very interested to open up shop here in Dubai, to bring the ecosystem from Switzerland here to Dubai, and of course in winter time, it's much better to be in Dubai than in Switzerland. And so I try to follow Hubertus and being the half year here and the other half year in Europe. So probably we see us much more often in the future.
So Chris, from an Asian perspective, what's your view? Or maybe introduce yourself first.
Oh, yes. First off, my name is Chris, and I'm coming all the way from Vietnam to be here. And first off, I would like to thank you for the conference to allow me to be here today. As a company, I'm coming from a product development company, and we have a wide range of product that really I think that if I can bring it here in Dubai and the Smart Cities project, I think it's going to be a big win for everyone. So from my perspective in Asia, I think one of the trends for the blockchain industry is that in 2018, most of the company will start having a better and stronger focus on compliance in building their products. Because right now, if I look at the markets, a lot of the products and a lot of the ideas are out there, and they just idea that, they're not really complying with the current compliance system of the local markets and stuff like that. So this is the year that all of the blockchain startups have to start focusing on the compliance and the legal aspect of whatever markets they are in.
And Chris, how big is the ecosystem in Vietnam from a blockchain crypto perspective?
So right now, at the moment, Vietnam is currently banned crypto at the moment. So it's better. So it's okay for you to keep cryptocurrency as collection purpose, but you shouldn't use it as a payment option. For example, to use Bitcoin to buy a car, to use Bitcoin to invest in something, then that is entirely illegal. But from the product development point of view, surprisingly, with a very conservative country like Vietnam, especially from the financial sector, it's quite active that the central government, the central bank, seeing the potential of blockchain, and actually they put a lot of emphasis of getting the potential from the application itself, but again, not including the cryptocurrency in it. So it's quite amazing.
And then pure from a blockchain technology perspective, how many startups are in the blockchain arena? Is this something that you can share?
In terms of numbers, actually we are very proud to be probably the oldest blockchain players in Vietnam, and we are 2 years old. But recently, within the past 3 months only, I think the number increased a lot. And right now we're looking at around 5 or 10 blockchain players in Vietnam. And surprisingly, a lot of the international players start coming to Vietnam as well. Not because the market is ready, not because the market is potential, but because Vietnam do have a lot of good quality engineer, good coder. And I don't know how about Dubai and other country, but one of the problem for a blockchain startup is that you guys have amazing ideas and concept, but without the coder, it's impossible to turn those ideas into products. So for that, I think Vietnam is a fairly good location for engineer base.
Very good. Sam, you want to continue representing Australia?
Sure. So I founded my company back in 2013 in Melbourne, Australia. We're in 6 countries now. As a venture builder in the space, we focus on investing in the ecosystem. We find that what brings together an ecosystem really is a space for everybody to gather. And we've created a culture where everybody comes over to drink beers and have pizza every Wednesday and talk with absolutely no agenda about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and what it means for digital disruption. So from my point of view, we started out very much in the grassroots, but we now have 4 listed companies where we're the largest shareholder of, 2 on the Australian Stock Exchange, 1 on the NASDAQ, and the other 1 on the OTC board. So we find that there's a lot of startups in the ecosystem that really don't understand what the world really needs in terms of a blockchain solution. They're developing things that are similar to a problem, looking for a solution, and we're here to help guide them so that they have the right partnerships in order to thrive. And I think the velocity of information that a blockchain center has is something we want to establish in every major city, and that includes Dubai.
Very good. Ralph, we've both been through the setup of the Crypto Valley Environment Ecosystem Association. This is over the last few years with the starting point with the Ethereum Foundation. This is, I think, one of the most mature one or advanced one in Europe. So what do you think, what are the critical success factors to build an environment like Crypto Valley over the last few years? What kind of dimension we have to keep in mind to work on?
That's a very good question, Oliver. In my opinion, it's 3 points what is important. First of all, is there capital to fund startups, to fund this, and to get further? Second of all, is there infrastructure, and infrastructure not only in terms of buildings, also in terms of regulations and all the environment you need? And third of all, is there enough talent? And when of these 3 points get together, you can build an ecosystem. When you have 2 out of the 3, you have some work to do. When you have 1 out of the 3, it's getting hard to build an ecosystem. So, and now with still a closer look to Switzerland, money is there. It's just hard to get, but money is there. Their infrastructure is probably one of the best in the world, even with academia, universities, and so on. And talent, did we have talent in the blockchain space? No, we didn't. But Vitalik decided to get to Zug, and that Vitalik came to Zug, that brought a lot of other people to Zug. And now when we have a meetup over there, it's 90% international, these meetups. And so the talent came. And now we have all the 3 important ingredients to foster this ecosystem. And the Crypto Valley Association, where Oliver is the president, has 660 members after 1 year. So, and that's quite amazing.
And that's, I think it's important to stress it. Hubert, do you agree with this kind of critical success factors? You have roots in Europe. You said you have also offices in Switzerland. If you now look at the Dubai environment, do you think this is those kind of critical success factors, as Ralph outlined, also apply for the Dubai environment?
Well, I think in terms of entrepreneurship and facilitating tech, Dubai is definitely the place to go in the region. I mean, that's no doubt about that, probably even beyond the region. The government is super supportive. They create infrastructures in terms of spaces and meetups. They try to link and connect people. When it comes to blockchain, obviously, there is still a very important part missing, which is regulation. So I think as long as we talk about private blockchains on an enterprise level that help to optimize government efficiencies and all these things which we heard this morning, you don't need a lot of regulation for that. That's just a normal enterprise contract, and you just go for it. When you apply it on a more broader scale, then probably in terms of investing, coin offerings, and these things, then the government still needs some homework to do, but I'm sure they know it. Abu Dhabi has already come up with a semi kind of regulation on initial coin offerings, and I'm very sure that Dubai won't lag behind. So overall, I can say the conditions or the willingness to create the conditions, I believe they are here. In terms of blockchain and the full adaptation of the crypto ecosystem, we are probably halfway there. There's still some work to do, but I'm pretty optimistic that the UAE will, and especially Dubai, will be a front runner here as well.
And Sam, how do you see this from Australia? Capital, as Ralph mentioned, is that the startup community is getting enough funding to build their business at the end, and access to resources from a know-how perspective, ideas, then a pro-business environment, regulation, policies. And do you think that's the case in your region?
Yeah, I think Australian startups always had struggling to raise capital because we don't have direct access to the global VC network. So it's out of I guess a sheer coincidence that we, back in 2013, being the first to do arbitrage in this industry amongst exchanges, we later on created a Bitcoin mining fund. And of course, people who were involved in all these earlier activities have made a substantial return. Off the back of that, we've been able to ride the wave in terms of creating ICOs as well as listing companies on the ASX that are specifically focused on blockchain. For instance, DigitalX in the last 6 months alone had their share price go up 20 times because they are an ICO advisory company in the space. So all this added together meant the Australian ecosystem kind of feeds off itself using the fuel that was generated in terms of earlier successes. And we have no shortage of ideas. The ecosystem now has evolved into everybody getting together on a Wednesday to work out what they should invest in next. So the problem I think Australian blockchain startups are finally facing is, sure, there have been a number of successful ICOs that everybody has been involved in, but how do we facilitate the build of their solutions? And there is just not enough talent in Australia to service the grand scope of some of these projects.
So do you think it's not the capital side, it's more the resource side, know-how, blockchain know-how, expertise to, ideas are there.
Yes.
Looks like capital also, access to capital is there, but know-how is there. So then what you're saying is the R&D part, the university, academia, is something that has, maybe Australia or a nation has to push for, also to have a pipeline of expertise accessible for these kind of projects.
I think regardless how good your technology is, if it's not implemented in the real world, it's vaporware. And that's why we're trying very hard to build a substantial development house in China in order to service the amount of great ideas and opportunities that have been born out of the Australian space.
And why do you think China has access to this talent pool? Because it is a global competition for talents in the blockchain arena. We're talking about maybe 30, 40,000 developers. I think it's growing the number, but it's still, compared to other businesses, it's a very limited talent pool.
Yes, that's right. And we see the most recent ban in ICOs and exchanges in China as a boon for us as a company, because it means a lot of our competitors are actually finding it difficult to justify why they even have blockchain developers if they're not going to raise money from the public markets. So we've been, whenever we hear our competitors not doing well, sending our HR team to camp at the foot of their building to hire their talent. And we've on average been hiring around 80 developers a month in order to then outsource to the global requirements of blockchain technology needs.
So Chris, this is opposite on your side now. For your business, that access to good talent engineers is not a problem, but access to capital is one maybe of the challenges. Is that correct?
Right, and it's slightly different because most of the it's become a trend, especially in Vietnam, that recently a lot of the blockchain startup, they still keep the base in Vietnam, but then they choose to do, for example, ICO in Singapore, whereas the regulation is supported the ICO and fundraising and stuff like that. But probably not in Vietnam. The ICO is not regulated in Vietnam yet, but not regulated yet sometimes means that it's a no at the moment. So, but coming back to rough 3 points of the kind of the pillars to build a successful startup, I completely agree with that. Just adding maybe 2 more points that from our experience, the involvement of the government is extremely and critical and important for the successful of the eco startup. And this can be in terms of, attraction kind of policy, just like Dubai, like the way they attract talents from other places. To build the place, first you have to invite people coming and start building the products over here. Then the second thing that, I don't know, this is can be my personal observation, but I feel like to be able to build up the right community and startup valley, the early leaders and the early members of the community have to do the right thing and the right direction for the community, because I don't know, but in some markets, some of the very early leaders, they choose to go basically a little bit evil direction in terms of fundraising and create a lot of precedents in terms of doing not exactly the right thing. So the incoming startups, they follow the same footstep. So the whole ecosystem is kind of a little bit corrupted So I think from my personal perspective, it's very important for the early players to show the right direction and doing the right thing for the community.
So you need risk takers, no? As a first mover, risk takers to take on certain risk to go into an undefined, under-regulated area
Right.
space and doing that, no?
Right.
And then also help the community to come up to speed, no?
Yes.
So that's a critical success factor that I see. Hubertus, now you as a representative, from a venture capital perspective, it's an exciting time for you to invest in startups. Do you think that your own business is also getting disrupted by, if you see $4.5 billion invested in blockchain startups through the ICO mechanism? Do you think the role of the venture capital, of the capital provider, is being redefined?
I believe so, yeah, because with ICOs and token sales, a third funding channel has been built up, apart from private equity, VC, and crowdfunding. The only thing which is yet lacking in many jurisdictions is regulation on that.
Yeah.
But I think it led to kind of a democratization of investing, which, in my view, substantially is a good thing. The question is eventually, how will the VC space deal with it? I heard many people talking about, colleagues saying, yeah, we will become redundant eventually, and so I don't believe this, because still in the crypto space, you need a lot of due diligence, you need a lot of know-how to be applied in order to judge the investments. So it's true that now the individual investor has the direct access without the middleman to invest in a company through token sales. But still, how does he do his math? How does he do his homework to assess if the deal is really good? Unless it's just a gambling investment. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about serious investing. So I still believe there will be room for that. Probably what will be or might be disrupted is the whole fee structures and these kind of things. That might be, but it's also not a bad thing at all. Overall, I believe that the disruption will happen, but it will happen not from today to tomorrow, gradually. And overall, I believe it's a very positive aspect.
Do you think that we end up as a hybrid model, that there's an area that the venture capital firms, I would say, for the seed and maybe earlier seed, that venture capital provide that funding, the ICO, then the middle piece, and then there's a bigger tickets are for the other one. You think that this kind of structure maybe that could maybe end up in a short-term perspective?
You start to see that already, companies that do equity rounds and they give their equity holders, so their investors basically, the shareholders, bonus tokens on the next ICO rounds, right, in order to facilitate just the next evolution. I think you're obviously addressing a different market to investors, but even in token sales now you're seeing huge VCs from Silicon Valley investing in ICOs as well, taking huge chunk of tickets, because they realize it's a very interesting model to get liquidity. Instead of selling their shares later on and being blocked in a VC for many years, for their LPs, it's even more attractive to have the asset liquid and tradable anytime they want. So there's a lot of positive aspects, and one additional thing which we didn't mention yet, obviously, is from the equity holder's perspective, the good thing is you're not getting diluted by an ICO. Obviously, you're raising capital without giving away some of your shares, but still the overall value of the company increases. So it's, overall, I see this as a very positive evolution for this investment space.
Yeah. Sam, Ralph, go ahead.
With the VC topic, and I think that's a big chance all over the world for decentralized world to get more power against the Silicon Valley, because the last 10 years, 20 years, what happened, all the big players came from there because the capital was there. And that's also a reason why the Silicon Valley wasn't investing in the blockchain topic in the first steps, because they said, hey, we are losing the power. Now they lost some of the power, and now they are coming back after that. Yeah? But it's still a chance, because when you have a startup in Vietnam or in Australia, you're still able to get 100 million or probably 200 million with an ICO. And that's a total new situation. And so capital raising in the startup world gets decentralized. And that's also a big thing, in my opinion.
and that's a good point from a geopolitical point of view. Now, so, if you look at China and Russia coming up to speed on the blockchain technology, much more so from a government supported. And if I look and Ralph is absolutely correct from a funding and also from the numbers of startups, looking in the US, there's a difference compared to other technology. Do you see that also? Is that and that becomes then a geopolitical topic then too, at the end?
Well, with the Chinese landscape amongst cryptocurrencies, I think we've seen some major failures for Chinese government to protect investors in the equity crowdfunding space, and also peer-to-peer lending space. And that's because China has a relatively light touch regulatory framework. A lot of the crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending players have now moved into a blockchain by saying, well, because Bitcoin can do it, so can we. They're selling PowerPoints, not really selling anything innovative. And I think China's ban on ICOs is allowing real companies that want to build real products get down to business. We, for instance, are partnered up in a JV that empowers via blockchain the traffic prediction mechanism for over 100 Chinese cities, and that is essentially succinctly built on the blockchain so that the prediction of traffic flows could increase from 5 to 15 minutes. We really find that China, as part of their 13th five-year strategy, are keen to explore blockchain significantly as a technology, and that's why for the exchanges and ICOs to be banned is a great move in order for retail markets who currently are relatively uneducated on what blockchain is to be insulated to a certain respect from the ecosystem.
But Chris, if you look at the big internet companies out of the Silicon Valley, coming up to speed in the last 10, 20 years, they are standing for a centralized business model. And to my surprise, now you hear a little bit more and more embracing the whole blockchain crypto topic. With Zuckerman last week, Zuckerberg mentioned that they have to look also from a Facebook perspective, because the structure, market structure in a decentralized environment, even for an eBay looking at OpenBazaar, etc., that's a significant change. Do you think that is being underestimated in certain regions, this kind of market change, structural change?
Hello. I think definitely it's being underestimated in some of the area, like the region, because I think particular a little bit from the American region, that people has been so familiar and getting used to the centralized way of those guys you mentioned, like Google, Facebook, or Amazon, and they hold such a big power over the globe, and sometimes they don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon. But if they do have a chance to really step out of the American region and go to Asia, particularly, or some of the area in Europe like Poland, Ukraine, they will see the movement is just so strong that if they don't react quickly enough, I think they will be slightly behind.
Yeah, Ralph. Yeah, Ralph, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think what is important, and you're coming out of this corporate world, Oliver, we have seen this offshoring in your time in the corporate world, and what we now have is in the startup world already decentralized teams. So that's something new. A few years ago, startups have been located together at one place. And now in the blockchain startup world, you will see probably 2 or 3 people in Switzerland, 10 people in Buenos Aires, 5 in Bucharest, and then Vietnam. And with the technology and with the mindset of this decentralized world, it's possible to do this also in the startup world. And that is also a big change for all over the world for the startups, and not going to the Silicon Valley because only there you are successful.
Yeah.
That's changed, and that's a big opportunity for Switzerland and a big opportunity here for Dubai and for Vietnam and Australia to take back a little bit of the power, because if we mention the big names like Google, Amazon, Facebook and so on, and we just imagine what they could do in 10 years, so there must be another side. There must be a power against it, or we have to find another solution, regulatory. And regulatory solutions in this area are not the best solutions usually.
I mean, Facebook is already considering and working on this subject. And as far as I heard, that the biggest issue that they are going to face to put Facebook on the blockchain, basically, is that it's simply commercially not viable. So they would have to spend 20 times the current cost in order just to maintain the server landscape for running everything on a blockchain, which means 20 times more ads, which annoy the users. So this is not something which is going to happen anytime soon. So I think the disruption in that space, if it's going to happen, has to come from new players entering the market. But
So
maybe just a brief, sorry, Oliver,
Yeah.
to come back on what Ralph said, it's very true. But you know, the decentralized setup of a company, you've already seen it in tech in general. I mean, Dubai is a perfect example. Many of the startups that evolved here, they have the core team here and the developers sitting in Vietnam, in Jordania, in other countries. I mean, Dubai has always been a hub, even in the old days when you look back into previous businesses, trading and whatever. And it will continue to be so, and hopefully also in blockchain.
Now, I think, Hubert, this is an important topic to stress. It's not only to provide capital, and then now, and that's also a challenge for Singapore and in Switzerland, is also to maintain that IP, the talents in the country. No? Is that, Sam, do you see that also? It's Australia, if I listen to you, if I outsource my engineering to China, do I miss a point that, you know, the IP, the expertise is leaving the country or is not coming in?
I think Australia has become a thought leader in
Yeah.
blockchain space. That means people come up with a lot more ideas than they could find developers to build. And we're just trying to resolve a scenario because we see China as well as India having larger population bases to produce more graduates that can be blockchain enabled to service the needs of, for instance, thought leadership base in Australia. And so it's not talent leaving, it's just the elevation of the talent to essentially conceptualize and, of course, export the idea so that the production and the delivery is handled by, obviously, a more cost-effective market.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, looking at your market from a governance perspective, governance role, and for me there are two models globally how to drive innovation. One is you're very close to Singapore model that, you know, MAS has a fintech program, 250 million Singapore dollars that have a clear defined way how to tackle this. They have blockchain use cases, they have labs, etc. That's pretty top down, putting money aside and drive the agenda. If you ask Ralph, and Ralph can explain a bit more, the Swiss model is the opposite. It is almost like help yourself. We keep the tax environment low. If you have a problem, call us. Something like that, Ralph. Is like that.
Absolutely.
So if you have the choice, if you're in the role of the Vietnamese government, what would your message or recommendation?
I think right now, if it's happening, Vietnam will probably follow
The Swiss
Ralph's model that as a blockchain startup, we have to maintain the communication line and the interaction with the some specific department of the government, depends on the product that you are develops, very close. Number one, to provide them the right information. Number two, to train them about this complex technology. And number three, to be there, just like you said. If the problem is popping up and we are there and they already kind of having understand the KYC on us and everything, probably then we can start doing something with the government from the bottom up way. Then once the government seeing some success, from the initial cooperation, then it's time for you to really push the gas and push it forward.
Okay. Hubertus, what do you think for Dubai? Is it more top-down, bottom-up?
Well, I think, I mean, if you compare it to Switzerland, I think the underlying question that every government, be Dubai, Switzerland, or Vietnam, or wherever, needs to ask himself is, to which extent does my own model of values, norms, fit to this kind of thing, right? Because here in blockchain, we're talking about decentralization, peer-to-peer, of about a completely new way to reach consensus within the society without interference of middlemen, governments, etc. So to which extent do you want to embrace that? And Switzerland obviously is probably the only direct democracy in the world where people can vote on every stuff. So to me, Switzerland is kind of the blockchain 0.0, if you want, right? The way it's working, right? And it's no wonder that the government has embraced it and has applied this laissez-faire attitude, which is deeply rooted in the society of the Swiss people. In other parts of the world, it might be different, but I'm not judging if it's good or bad. It's just different. And I think Dubai will have to apply and interpret crypto in the way that it fits to their own values and norms. And based on that, create the regulations and everything on top.
So Ralph, looking now, we are in a decentralized world. So is Switzerland a perfect environment, or would you take the 200 million?
I would say Switzerland has decentralization in the DNA already. So that's a great success factor. But on the other side, and you know it, Oliver, we have to fight for everything in Switzerland. And if you have a strong government like here, and the government is committed and says, hey, our target is to be 2020 fully on the blockchain as government, then this is the only way to do it. Because everyone in Switzerland who's trying to bring blockchain in the governmental process knows that it takes 20 years probably. There are the usual rules, how you buy services and so on. And that is a lot of forks. So to be honest, in Switzerland, blockchain in the governmental sector in the next 20 years will be no big business. That's really hard because there's no reason for doing it directly, and the government is not taking 1 million or 1 billion and saying, hey, put it in, we do it. On the other side, it enables the startup world to be very open, think very libertarian, and start up on this side. So on both sides, we can find the best of two worlds, if you'd say it like this. One side for the startup blockchain world, and here probably for the corporate world, for process innovation in the government world, for the real estate world, and so on. We heard a lot of examples, and we will hear them tomorrow too. That's my personal opinion.
Okay. And Sam, how do you see the role of the government in Australia? Is that bottom up, top down? What's your take on?
Sure. I think Australia is definitely very bottom up because we, back in 2014, actually had someone kind enough to lend a bus to us. We then rebranded it and called it the blockchain bus, and went out to primary schools and secondary schools and gave out little kids books that are very, one sentence on each page talks about not only Bitcoin but Dogecoin. So my point is. The first ever ICO done by primary school kids are actually in Australia. And they raised $5,000 to buy some new IT equipment. But in addition to that, I think these kind of use cases generated enough attention in press and also dialogue in government to come and visit the Blockchain Centre, learn about the technology, and I think to date we're still the first country to allow equity token offerings in the world, and so you could raise and do an ICO and offer tokens that are backed by equity up to 100 people via regulatory sandbox.
Very good. So before we open up a question for the audience. Quick statement, looking at this very ambitious 2020 blockchain strategy of Dubai, what's your number one recommendation, how to make it happen, based on your experiences out of different ecosystems?
Well, I'll start. I believe creating a community where people engage on a weekly basis, a permanent space where anyone could walk in and get their blockchain fix. Kind of like an Apple store with a Genius bar, you know. I think that's what the success of the Melbourne blockchain ecosystem was reliant on, because we had from 2014 a 800 square meter space where people could come to at any time over a 10-hour period, 6 days a week.
Very good. Chris?
I think this is one thing that I think Dubai is already doing it, but probably at the higher level, which is let the competition begins. I hope that, you know, like Dubai is opening up, like in terms of competition, to really welcoming blockchain startups and technology to really flooding into the country, because I talked to some of the guys out there, and it's really strong commitment from the government of Dubai to meet the target of 2020, but there's a lot of things need to be done. So I think competition and welcoming startups is key.
Okay. Ralph?
That's super hard for me to answer, because I think the technology today is not far enough that we are able 2020 already to scale up for that what Dubai needs. So it's a great target, and you have to have great targets, but if you want to be open and see what technology is out and not only focusing on one technology, what is probably in 5 years not the right technology, it's hard to say what is the best way. So if you want to focus and get a target, you have to go in one technology, and then probably you miss out the next steps.
Okay. Hubert?
I think the fundamental thing, apart from what has been said by my colleagues, is creating a capital ecosystem that allows the funding of this ecosystem, because I mean, as long as there is no capital from the private sector running into this from the region, it will be hard to create the ecosystem, simply because you won't be able to fund protocol developers. I mean, now more and more money is flowing into protocol development, fortunately, so developers go away from the app to the protocol because of the ICO money. But I think if something like this can be opened up in Dubai, it needs a proper backup, which is a legal standard, and I'm looking forward to have that.
Very good.
The panel has been quite interesting, throwing on opportunities with a clear leadership shown by Dubai. Now let's consider the readiness of a country like Dubai, which has started into digital government to smart government, and we are now talking about blockchain-based government services. Now my question is twofold. One, what would be a hypothetical timeline for a government to get onto this blockchain in the promised timeline? And my second question is about what would be the low-hanging fruits? Would it still be top-down as suggested by Oliver?
So you're asking about, is the
A
blockchain...
roadmap or a timeline associated with an entire government with all its, let's say, 50 to 90 government organizations getting onto the blockchain, a broad timeline or a pace or a roadmap?
Would like to answer that question?
Well, I think it's hard for us. We're not in the government.
Do you mind sharing which country are we talking about? Because it's really Dubai. Because it really depends on the technical infrastructure, like Raf mentioned that. Okay, so
Probably take it from another side. What is the blockchain? We try to bring value in the blockchain. And what is the value? The first value has been cryptocurrency, so Bitcoin is the value, and it's that. Other topics are bringing real estate into the blockchain. So, and then you have to see what around the real estate you need, or bringing luxury goods into the blockchain, or the biggest value we have on Earth is bringing people onto blockchain. That means an electronic identification of every one of us in the blockchain. So first of all, we need to bring the values on the blockchain, and second, we need to bring the ecosystem around the values on the blockchain. And I have no clue how the government is organized here, but you have to see every time these small ecosystems, who is using this value, what you are bringing on the blockchain. Because in my opinion, some companies are going the wrong way. When an insurance company says, hey, we want to do insurance on the blockchain, and they try to bring the policy on the blockchain, that's wrong. They have to bring the value on the blockchain, what to be insured, and then the insurance is one part of it. So, and to answer that, have a roadmap to bring the values on the blockchain, and when you got the values on the blockchain, bring the ecosystem around the values on the blockchain. That's my opinion.
Okay. Okay. Next question.
Thank you for this really interesting panel. My question is this: initially in Zug, when you started with the blockchain ecosystem, it was because you linked the strong financial sector with the blockchain and innovation and payments, and then you built this regulation around it. So when you look at Dubai, okay, do you think they should do it with everything, or is there a niche that they can start with that they're really strong in, that they could hook both the startup system and the physical infrastructure that's already there? I mean, whatever they're really good at.
I think, most of the country, when they're talking about blockchain adoption, normally financial industry would be the first choice. But personally, I think that for Dubai, the smart government scope would be the quick winner for the government. So because with the smart government, it will include, for example, digital identity on blockchain, then interacting system between the governments and the citizens or something like that. So for me, that's the step one of whatever coming later for the smart cities, coming with financial, then healthcare, then real estate. So for me, I think Dubai should start with the smart government first. And I think the government have done a lot of things in the government scope. So why don't we keep working on that?
You can also add in the part of the smart government, the whole processes for onboarding free zone companies here. It's a huge topic. I mean, Dubai is one of the biggest ecosystems in free zones. So if you can put this on the blockchain, I think this is also a great example. But overall, I believe at the end of the day, blockchain is like the internet, right? Do you ask today, is it the internet for real estate or the internet for bank? No, it's the internet. And I think if you really want to create an ecosystem, you have to open it up as quick as possible and not be too specific about the verticals you want to concentrate on.
May I add my 2 cents on the strategy part? We have been talking very generic about the blockchain strategy of Dubai. It is into 3 parts, and I'm very happy to hear the panel address each of the 3 parts. The first part is talking about making the government departments more efficient. That's why you see the utilities and the land records coming in first, just like Ralph had mentioned. And the second part of it is talking about creating an ecosystem that encourages the businesses that are based on these technologies and integrating the existing technologies into them. For example, digital payments, probably coming through, but other kind of cryptocurrencies. The final part is where the global forum is given a player in this, so that a traveler is comfortable in getting his identities and visas endorsed and bookings done based on a personal profile, completely based on blockchain. So it addresses a people-centric model based on blockchain, but across all the 3 segments. This is my 2 cents about the strategy from Dubai. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for the final statement. And I would like to thank you for the panelists for a really engaging and valuable discussion. And please give them a big round of applause. Thank you.